Okay, we're ready.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Denny Fan, and I will be your hearing officer today for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterward through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet. So if you would like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider 6 items. Order number 204686 to consider approval from SF Planning and task for appurtenances in the public right-of-way for which maintenance and liability were passed to the Master Homeowners Association for the Hunter's View project. Order number 204690 to consider the removal of 1 street tree without replacement adjacent to 1020 Baker Street. Order number 204691 to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement of 1 adjacent to 2860 to 2862 Greenwich Street. Order number 204692 to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 60 Stonecrest Drive. Order number 204693 to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 3944 22nd Street. And order number 204694 to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 1407 Shafter Avenue. My job as the hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimonies, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make any recommendations to the Director. The Director will then make the final determinations. When the Director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them if you have provided contact information. The hearing will proceed as follows for the 6 cases. I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case, and then I will allow the property owner, appellant, or applicant to speak, then any member of the public who wants to speak, and then again the department if the department would like to address any comments. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers and will indicate when the speaker has 30 seconds left. If you are a party to the proceeding, I will call on you to speak. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak. You will then have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments after then. If you are a member of the public or witness who wants to speak, wait for me to call for public comments. Then use Zoom's raise your hand feature if you're on a computer to put yourself in the queue to speak. If you are dialing in on your phone, dial *9 to indicate you're raising your hand. When it is your turn to speak, I will recognize you. If on your phone and you're muted, press *6 to unmute yourself. If you would like to use visual materials in your presentation, please let me know before you speak, and you will have the standard 3 minutes to provide your comments. Comments and questions should be addressed to me and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of the hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will then close the item. We will now begin the hearing. Order number 204686. May I have Public Works please make its presentation?
Good morning, hearing officer. This is John Kwong from Public Works. What we have is a request for this hearing is because of a request for continuance of a major encroachment that was heard earlier in April. This hearing is to provide public notification to the general public in order for any members of the public to provide any comments that they may have on this major encroachment permit application. The area in question is the Hunters View development area, the Hope Hunters View development area, where the Homeowners Association has applied to take over the maintenance and liability responsibility for all the sidewalks fronting the development area, along with the passenger loading curb ramps and the retaining wall for one location within that development area. It has been reviewed by Public Works and the design and construction meets city standards. And the staff recommendation is to accept this request from the homeowners association to take over the maintenance responsibility and move this forward to the Board of Supervisors. This would conclude my presentation. I am prepared to take on any questions from either yourself or the public at this point.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant or homeowner association here that would like to speak? Okay,
We have Catherine Etzel. You may go ahead and speak.
Yes, hi, my name is Catherine Etzel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Hi, I'm from the John Stewart Company. We are the master developer of Hunter's View. I concur with everything that John Kwong just indicated regarding our desire for the Master Homeowners Association to take over maintenance and liability responsibility for certain areas within the Hunter's View development. So nothing further to add to what John stated. But happy to answer
great.
questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this matter? I don't see any right now. All right. Leaving it open if there's any public comment. Seeing none. Would the department like to make any additional comments before we close the item?
John Kwong from Public Works, once again, we have no additional comments at this point. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no more comments for this item, I will now close the item and will make my recommendation to the director. Thank you. Okay. Next order is order number 204691. This is to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement of 1 adjacent to 2860 to 2862 Greenwich Street.
Mr. Fan,
Oh, sorry
actually,
about that.
yeah, okay, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I skipped it. Sorry. This is actually order number 204690, which is to consider the removal of 1 street tree without replacement adjacent to 1020 Baker Street. May I please have the department make your presentation?
Good morning. This is Chris Buck with San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And pardon me, earlier in the call, I had my daughter's Hermione profile photo up on my Zoom account. So I've updated my still image to a portrait of me hugging a tree. So my family will have a good laugh later at dinner. So I'm going to share my screen and present a PowerPoint just to go over the images and this first case. So I just want to confirm, Cerise, if you can see my PowerPoint.
Yes, we can.
Okay, let me get to the beginning then.
Yes.
Good morning. So again, good morning, hearing officer. Regarding 1020 Baker Street, this is the removal of 1 street tree without replacement. The staff at Bureau of Urban Forestry approved the removal and the public protested. This order supersedes a previous order 204629 that was previously scheduled for April 21st. We had an issue with getting the mailing out in time. So that was the reason for rescheduling. So the subject tree, the common name is New Zealand Christmas tree, and the Latin name for that, or scientific name, is Metrosideros excelsus or excelsa. It's from New Zealand. It's actually a common street tree in San Francisco. So in and of itself, it's not an inappropriate tree if planted in a rather large sidewalk with adequate spacing from utilities and infrastructure. The history behind this tree in the site is, even though you can see it here, it's not planted, quote unquote, within the developed or paved sidewalk. but it is technically within the public right of way. The public right of way in this case is wider than just the sidewalk as you see it. And so what happened is maybe 10 years or so ago, based on Google Street View, we don't have a record of this tree being planted through a permit with our Bureau or Public Works. So it looks like a property owner, plopped in this small tree, and it looked kind and gentle enough, but it's a tree that really needs more room. And so, to nobody's surprise at our Bureau, within 10 years here, the tree has already caused quite a bit of damage to infrastructure. And so I'm going to show just a few images of this. Typically, when an approved sidewalk tree is planted in the sidewalk with adequate space, we will see some tree root damage. And tree root damage in and of itself is not a problem when it's in a sidewalk that's wide enough to account for its future growth. In this case, it was planted really close to the neighbor's retaining wall. And so from this image, you can see the image on the left, there's grade change between the property on the left and the property on the right. So this isn't just a decorative brick wall that, hey, we could tell an owner just to get rid of it and not even have it there, and then that buys us another 10 years. It actually is required so that someone doesn't fall off the walkway as they approach the home. Example, if you're in a wheelchair and your wheel caught the edge of that, you're going down. Same thing with if you're not paying attention as a pedestrian, you could fall off that and fall down. So this isn't a decorative wall that we can require the owner to get rid of. One other thing I wanted to point out is the image on the right. There's a yellow tape measure and there's a black Sharpie marker on the ground. And that's showing where the public right of way extends to from the face of the curb. So the tree is technically within the public right of way. I wanted to point that out. So we were approached by the property owner about the damage, and there was a lot of back and forth about what to do with this tree. They've reached out to our claims department, and some of the issues with the tree, again, this is an example of wrong tree, wrong place. This species doesn't belong in a setback area right up against a retaining wall. And so our primary concern and reason for approving this tree is wrong tree, wrong place. Even if we were to remove the one stem closest to the retaining wall, the root system is still damaging the retaining wall and the sidewalk area in front of the tree. The other issue is that it's planted right on top of the cable communication lines, the ATT lines. We have images of that. In the bottom left image, you can see those orange markings going perpendicular from the roadway towards the home, marked over the curb. And that's showing that literally the tree is on top of phone and cable. It's also pretty close to being nearly on top of the gas line. So it's also, as you can see from the images, again, these roots, if they were out in the sidewalk with plenty of room, wouldn't be an end of the world. But in this case, they're definitely doing damage. And even if we were to prune those off, there's further damage expected. And again, it's much too close to two utilities. So a pretty straightforward case. The owner really did want to try to retain the tree. So we appreciate their desire to have green, healthy looking trees out there. One of the things I wanted to point out is the property owner who planted the tree here is in the home is in the center of the image. They have a mature olive tree on the left of the driveway, and that will remain. And that's where there is adequate space to have a nice, healthy, large stature tree. But there simply is no room for a tree where this New Zealand Christmas tree was planted. Also, the neighbor to the far right, just out of the image, they have a tree planted in their setback area. So we don't see any replantable locations within these two frontages. So unfortunately, it's removal without replacement. That's a little bit about the issue here, but this is really a wrong tree, wrong place. And within just 10 years, a tree that should have never been planted here is causing a lot of damage. That pretty much concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Is the property owner here and would like to speak on this order? See a Roger with his hands up.
This is Roger Nguyen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm actually the property owner adjacent to that. I'm at 1010 Baker. So that's what staff has just shown you is the damage to my walkway and my pony wall. And I want to say that I fully concur with staff's presentation. We've been waiting for a while for over almost a year working with the next door property owner. But in the meantime, we've had, taken a risk by having the walkway lifted, the pony wall lifted, as it was a major tripping hazard at the sidewalk also. So it was a concern for us. So then we asked the property owner at 1020 to set up, get a contractor on board to expose all this item to show the roots, but at the same time, give a temporary medication to the tripping hazard. So we just want to show that we're trying to be diligent about this, but at the end, we're going to continue to face significant damages to our own property if nothing's being done about it. So again, just want to support staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Is the property owner here that would like to speak, or was Roger the applicant?
I believe he was the neighbor to the applicant.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is Chris Buck with staff again, just to interject. Even though we have an applicant in this case, it's a little, there's this shared responsibility here, just to kind of jump into the details. Because, claims, they are their own division within Public Works, but because the tree was planted without a permit, and this may not be official, but my understanding is they're likely not to accept the claim for the damage because it was planted without a permit or without permission. But moving forward, the city would be responsible after these repairs are made. So once that property owner really had those roots exposed and finally saw just how damaging it was, they realized, okay, the tree's gotta go. So we did have them submit a removal application. So in this case, even though it's technically in the public right of way and Public Works has responsibility for trees within the right of way, in this case, we would be issuing a permit to 1020 to remove the tree. That said, I just want to explain why that owner may not be here, is that in many ways, Public Works is the lead at the moment. We'll issue a permit to them. I just didn't want to reflect poorly on them that they're not here to support their own application, because we're in close communication quite a bit, and they may have just felt like we're in the driver's seat. We completely support what they're trying to do, and we appreciate both owners not having World War III over this. So I just wanted to share that additional feedback. Thank you.
Also, this is Roger Nguyen again, if I may speak.
You can speak very briefly, but
okay. Yeah, the reason why we're all flagged on this too is we had got a written notice from DPW for a sidewalk that's been lifted. That's what it was sitting in front of our property, and that's how all this was initiated at the same time.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this? I see Mr. Josh Clipp.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Denny, it's been a long time. Good to see you again. just a quick note about the retaining wall on the sidewalk regarding accessibility. That same photo shown in the presentation also shows a car and city barricades blocking basically the entire rest of the sidewalk. So if we're concerned about safety and tripping hazards, things of that nature, I think we ought to hold ourselves to the same standard that we hold this tree. Secondly, cable network is not a reason for removing a tree in and of itself. Those can be moved. The city has a specific number or specific requirements around a number of infrastructural elements, and cable internet is not on that list. And then lastly, there really is no reason a tree can ever be taken out without replacement in this city. We are thousands of trees behind on our urban forest plan that was rolled out in 2014. There is always a spot to plant a tree in this city as a replacement. And my guess is that if we fanned out for a block or two within this location, we would easily locate one of those spots. So I would respectfully object to the order being issued without replacement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see another hand here. Bunch of numbers. 6.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm the owner of 1020, where the tree is growing. And Roger, who's the property owner next door, with the damage to his walkway, and I and his brother have been working closely for over a year, to try to remediate this. Initially, I contacted several arborists to see how to handle it, and then called the city, and it became obvious that it was a city tree. Initially, there was no intention on our part for this to happen. For years, I've been at this property for 41 years, and for years there was a small bush in that area growing, and we trimmed it back and trimmed it back. We never planted it. We planted everything else there, but at some point we said, well, it might be nice to have a tree on this side. We have one on the other side, so we let it grow, and of course it became a monster, and we're where we are right now. So we have tried to be cooperative with Nick Nguyen and his brother, the property owners next door, and with the city, who has also been cooperative, coming by many times and looking at this. And the agreement was, I said, well, the property, although it's officially a city tree, it's on my property, it's doing damage to yours, get a contractor and let's take care of it. So we have no objections to the plans. I mean, obviously, it's nice to have a tree in front of your house. I hate to see it go, but I understand the ramifications of having it there, and we're all pretty much in agreement of how to deal with it. Okay.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Would the department like to address any comments before we close this item?
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you for everyone's comments. I will now close this item and will make my recommendations to the director. Next order is order number 204691. This is to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement of 1 adjacent to 2860 to 2862 Greenwich Street. May I have the department make their presentation, please?
Good morning, Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. And I'm going to go ahead and screen share and get this back to current slide. Hold on just a moment. Thank you. So this next item is to consider the removal of 2 street trees with replacement with 1 street tree. Staff has approved the removals and the public has protested. And this is 2860 to 2862 Greenwich Street. The two subject trees are Blackwood acacia or Acacia melanoxylon. They're fast-growing species. The city, we planted quite a bit across San Francisco, but by the late to mid 1990s, we're realizing that there were enough issues in managing them that we stopped planting them as street trees. One of the primary concerns is root failures. So we've experienced a lot of root failures where just a little bit of root pruning shortly after can destabilize the tree, and over time decay. The species does not compartmentalize or tolerate a lot of root pruning. So we're seeing a lot of root failures. There can also be stem failures if enough decay is present, and we'll talk about that today as well. Here's an image of the two subject trees. The trees have been topped. We'll show images from that back in 2004, 2005. At this point, our primary concern are branch failures that are occurring at the old topping cuts. So there's decay present, weakly attached, stress response, or epicormic growth. And so these branches and even mild winds are starting to break off. There's also decay present in fruiting bodies within some of those wounds in the main trunks of the trees. So coincidentally, I used to work for Friends of the Urban Forest as their education coordinator, and I used to ride my bike down Greenwich and enter the Presidio at the Lion Gate, just around the street from where these two subject trees are located. So when they were topped, I took this photo and forwarded it to Public Works, and Public Works did issue a fine for the excessive pruning. And it shows a classic image of trees that have been topped, and it actually made it into the cities and Friends of the Urban Forest and the Urban Forestry Council's booklet about proper tree care. So it's such a coincidence. I felt like we had to include that in this presentation, just to let you know that I've personally been involved with the trees for now more than 15 years. So literally these are the poster children for why you don't want to top trees. The result is what we're now faced with, which are stem failures throughout both trees. We'll talk about tree one. We ordered the tree numbering with a flow of traffic on that side of the street. So tree one has had extensive sidewalk repairs made, and there's a large fruiting body. Fruiting bodies typically get larger each year, so it takes a while for them to get this large. So the fruiting body demonstrates to me as a trained professional, as a certified arborist, that there's decay present and likely an extensive amount of decay. But we do have concerns about Blackwood acacia trees, even when no decay is present, if we're cutting roots to repair sidewalks. The sidewalk repair was not made by Public Works, so I can't state with any certainty how many roots were encountered and how many roots were cut, which does concern me. So tree one cannot be replaced due to the proximity to the gas line. It's shown here. It's this circular valve cover. We need 3 feet on center from this, and this gas line runs perpendicular. So it's just about almost on top of the gas line. So the location between 2 driveways and the gas line does not allow us to replace the tree in this location. Here's a look at the main stems of tree number 1. There's a lack of clearance over the road, which is causing a lot of the damage on the main stem on the left. Some of the other damage that has occurred is from branch failures. Our team took photos and was just demonstrating with some of these diagrams the poor branching attachments and where decay is present. And they were stating that there's decay present on the other side of this union, which is a weakly attached union because both stems are narrowly attached with not much room to grow between them, which is a common failure point within trees. Here's the fruiting body that was just pointed out and noted by our staff. Tree number 2 Again, similar issues where the old topping cuts were made, there's decay present. And so though the trees look green and healthy from the layperson's perspective, where those branches attach are not healthy, and they're actually very prone to failing. So even though the trees are relatively small, as these branches continue to get larger and heavier, more and more branches will break off. Again, tree 2, which is in the foreground in this image, can be replaced. So the loss of tree number 1, we'll definitely be looking at recommending a large stature species for this location. One of our urban forestry inspectors for this zone is suggesting a platanus tree, a large stature platanus tree. Again, more images of tree 2. This doesn't show a whole lot, but it does show how these main stems go up, and near the tops of the images, you can see them divide into 2 to 3 of these additional branches. And that's where the old topping cuts were made. And as a stress response, new branches were formed, but they are superficially attached on the outer edge of the bark. Issues with tree 2, again, extensive sidewalk repair, which is a major red flag for us with the species. And there's decay and some girdling and impacts to the root crown of this tree, likely from the formation of the previous basin that was beginning to girdle some of that. That's a common failure point for blackwood acacia when we look at where failures occur. So our primary concerns with both trees is root failure, but along with stem failure. The other issue with tree 2 is this really extensive decay within the center of the trunk. And our inspector wanted to point out that the decay is so extensive that you can actually see through the other side of the trunk in daylight. This is another image of tree number 2. This one can be replanted. It is far enough away from the utilities to allow us to replace it. So just to reiterate, we have an application from the property owner to remove these 2 trees. If we were in the area and performing routine grid work, we would typically remove these on our own. In this particular case, the applicant submitted it. So we do have a number of folks in the public who, when they submit removal applications, is to some degree, it's it's allowing us to focus resources on other trees. So we don't say no if someone applies. Let me clarify that. If we agree with the reasons for removal, we approve tree for removal and allow a property owner to remove it and replace it. So we appreciate that. But again, if someone submits a removal application simply because they want to remove a tree, we look at the health of the tree, and there's a good chance we may deny it if there's no issue with the tree, of course. So that's a little bit of the backstory here, is just that the property owner has applied to remove these. They applied to remove 2 and plant 2. Unfortunately, tree number 1 can't be replanted in that location. What we do in this case is issue a permit to the property owner to remove both trees and replace, again, with 1 tree, and our urban forestry inspector is working on replacement species with the property owner. Our recommendation with a loss of 2 mature trees would be that the replacement tree would be a large stature tree, eventually at maturity, likely a platanus. And that concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Is the property owner here and would like to speak on this? Okay.
Hi there. My
Hi.
name's Olivia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
You have
okay.
3 minutes.
My name's Olivia Peterson. I'm the property owner, and I just want to thank Mr. Buck for the presentation and his attention to detail on this. We really appreciate it. As he mentioned, we did apply to have the trees removed because we were concerned about the safety of people walking by and wanted to do the right thing for the neighborhood. Unfortunately, we were really hoping to replace both trees, so and would just love to do that. But understand that these, I believe it's the first tree cannot be replaced because of the gas line. So I was wondering if you could make a recommendation, Mr. Buck, for a process to explore other locations that we could potentially put a tree. One thing I had seen in the neighborhood is trees that are butted up against properties as small trees. So we could have one large platanus tree in location number 2 and maybe something small that kind of goes against the property. And if you have, obviously we can't discuss that now because we don't have time, but if you have a recommendation for how I would explore that, I'd really appreciate it. And that's all from me.
Great, thank you so much. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this order? I see Mr. Clip.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, so even though humans abused pretty badly both of those trees, they both provided ecosystem services. And so when we don't replace those, we lose them, and we lose them at a time that we absolutely cannot afford to continue losing environmental benefits, and specifically trees that are our allies in climate change. So I would respectfully object to any decision permitting removal without both being replaced, either at this location or one of the thousands of empty basins around the city. And I would respectfully object, especially in light of the property owner who is affirmatively seeking that same result. So I would ask that the department go back and please work that out with the homeowners so that we do not continue to just lose trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Buck, would you like to address any comment?
Thank you, staff with Bureau of Urban Forestry. Yeah, we for sure will look at any and all possibilities and that immediate frontage if there is a way to find a location that maybe back a sidewalk. Typically, our team is looking at that, but when we have a homeowner who's willing to consider alternatives in terms of where it's located at the back of sidewalk, it may not be something that we typically recommend, but we're always willing to look at, work outside of the box in that regard. It's actually saying no to planting a tree is, I've always found as a professional, a lot harder to do than having to tell someone that we need to remove a tree, because it just feels like you're, stripping away this right to something, that's fundamental. So it's difficult, it weighs on us. And for that reason, we definitely look closely at where replacement options exist. If there is not a space immediately adjacent to that property, we can look at other frontages. We don't typically refer to that as a replacement tree. So our urban forest plan, like we plant a lot of trees throughout the city. And so that's kind of our plan for replacing trees when they're removed, not necessarily planting a tree 2 blocks away. But I hear the feedback from Mr. Clip, and for sure, after this hearing, I'll reach out to our inspector and make sure that we connect with the homeowner and just keep the conversation going. Because if there's a way to find space for a tree, we're willing to do that. So we'll keep looking at that. It's not something jumps out at me in terms of our typical spacing. It could be something creative at the back of sidewalk if there is space. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more comments on this item, I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. The next order is order number 204692. This is to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 60 Stonecrest Drive. May I have the department make their presentation?
Good morning. Thank you. It's Chris Buck again with Bureau of Urban Forestry, San Francisco Public Works. And let me just queue up this PowerPoint again. To repeat, this is an application for the removal of one street tree with replacement. Staff denied the removal application and the applicant has appealed that denial. Again, 60 Stonecrest, order 204692. Here's an image of the subject tree. It's the same species that we were just discussing adjacent to Greenwich. So it's a blackwood acacia tree, Acacia melanoxylon. And although our staff, in the preparation for this hearing, I was reviewing the process that led to our staff to deny the request to remove the tree. And it's, as part of this preparation, I think I'd like to modify that because the issues that I see here revolve around root pruning and repeated sidewalk damage. The tree also has extremely poor structure. And so I'll talk a little bit more about kind of how we got an application and how this went from, you know, an owner seeking removal and us denying it to now, I believe Public Works, the better recommendation here is to approve this tree for removal because of the damage to the root system from the root pruning. So this is an image of the current setting and situation. So the sidewalk has been repaired directly adjacent to this property, the subject property, but there is additional damage in the foreground. You can see the displacement in the driveway to the neighboring property. So although some of the sidewalk damage was repaired by the fronting property owner, Public Works still has damage to repair in these other areas. And again, for Public Works, we are extremely uncomfortable root pruning this species, Acacia melanoxylon. If we're root pruning an acacia, it likely means we're removing it because of the failures that we've had on streets such as Divisadero and Haight. So we do still have a number of acacias in San Francisco. The largest ones that we have are on some of our busy thoroughfares like Divisadero, Haight Street, and Oak and Fell. And so we're still working hard to retain the ones that we do have that have not required sidewalk repair and root pruning. But they're becoming fewer and far between. So it's just something to put out there. I think our staff, when evaluating this tree for removal, weren't considering just how averse we are to root pruning blackwood acacias. The other issues with this tree is the structure. It has extremely poor structure. And again, one of the reasons for the property owner submitting a removal application is they didn't realize the tree was in the right of way. They assumed it was their responsibility. Our inspector double checked the public right of way and realized this tree is technically in the public right of way. We had a number of trees on Stonecrest that were not inventoried during the inventory, the citywide inventory. So that was one reason that it came up in our database. It wasn't in our database as a city maintained tree. We're also out of cycle here, so we're not going to be pruning trees in this immediate area for at least a year or two. So in those cases, we have had property owners submit removal applications where if we agree with the reason for removal, we'd approve it. In this particular case, our staff person denied the request to remove this tree, but the more I look at it in preparation for the hearing, there's very poor structure, and it's been root pruned extensively to make those repairs. And so I can't, for consistency, we've been here before at departmental hearings talking about the issues and concerns we have with blackwood acacia. And we have root pruning history here, which is problematic, but the structure, this typically would be a few main stems with smaller secondary branches. The tree was topped many, many years ago, and the resulting form is really prone to fail. You can see codominant stems with included bark and decay near the base of where the old topping cuts were made. And so any number of these stems could fail and have failed. Here and there, you can see some of the old injuries. Regarding the overall site in the future, there is room to require a replacement tree at the site, and it would be behind the fence, behind this wall, but still within the 12-foot wide public right-of-way. So the recommendation here at the staff level, again, we denied it, but in preparation for the hearing, I just don't see how we can justify sticking with the denial when there's been extensive sidewalk repair made along this entire frontage. There's additional damage that needs to be repaired. So again, if we root prune acacia melanoxylon, it really equals removal because of the liability. Secondarily, this tree has very poor structure, prone to fail in any number of locations. So with that, our recommendation, unfortunately, in preparation for the hearing is to approve this tree at the staff level and require a replacement tree that would be planted behind the fence. And we would coordinate with the property owner whether they wish to plant that replacement tree or whether Public Works would do that. That concludes our staff presentation for this item at 60 Stonecrest. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is the property owner here who would like to speak?
We have Angela Borges. Go ahead, please. You're able to unmute. Hello, can you hear me, Angela? Angela, are you able to hear me?
Looks like if we can't hear her, we will move on to public comment. And if she's able to join us, we'll take her comments. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this? Mr. Clip?
Wait.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
we can.
Thank you. Yeah, so a little follow-up on a few of the items on this agenda that have been without replacement. And I just want to really encourage Public Works to really think outside the box, because I know that we are basically out of money to replace trees because of watering constraints. So if someone, who's seeking to remove trees says, I'd really like to figure this out, and let's really take them up on this and add a tree to an empty basin along an established watering route. We really cannot continue thinking in such disaggregated terms. This is really, it's not, urban forest is not an urban list of trees according to street or district. It's a forest. And then on this particular tree, I have to say I'm very confused because here this was an application that was denied by the inspector, and now we're at a hearing where it's being said that the extremely poor structure, very poor structure, prone to fail, extensive root pruning, and it's pretty confusing as a member of the public to try to understand how our inspectors could not have seen that immediately on a visual inspection. And then if so, why they would have denied it, or why did they, it's very confusing why it was denied by whomever went out and looked at it. And here we are, at the hearing, and this is being, reversed dramatically in real time. And so it's just not doesn't really inspire public confidence on what's going on in terms of tree evaluations. So I would just say overall, as a confused member of the public who would like to be able to rely on our tree inspectors, I just, on that basis, would respectfully object to the removal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Miss Angela Borges, would you still like to speak? Hello, Angela, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm having some difficulties.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay,
If you'd like to speak, you have 3 minutes.
okay, great. So we'd like to thank staff. I'm here on behalf of the homeowners, and we'd like to thank staff and you, the hearing officer. We have been working with our arborist to choose a tree that could fit in that space behind the wall that we would maintain and water and meet all the requirements that replacement tree needs to meet. And we were looking at replacing with a ginkgo tree, a couple different varieties. And I feel like it would be a really good, right now that tree, while it's not healthy and there are issues with it, it is quite a dramatic tree. And so we know that this is not a light matter to remove this tree. And it's very dramatic as you round the corner, and I think it helps slow down traffic a little bit. And so I think the ginkgo will have that same appeal even at a young age. And it's a really special tree to the homeowner. The existing tree is very special. The homeowner actually has her grown sons in town right now, and they all talked about how they remember it growing up. So it is very special, but a ginkgo tree also has quite significance to the client and the homeowner. So we just feel like that would be a good replacement. And again, we thank staff for looking into this repeatedly, because we do feel like it's unsafe, and we will of course go with any direction that the hearing officer makes. So thank you very much for your time. And also a thank you to Susan. We've been working with her on this, and she's been great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, would the department like to address any comments?
Thank you. Chris Buck again with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry. I wanted to speak to a couple of items brought up by Mr. Clip. Really good points. For sure, our team evaluates thousands of trees each year, and the goal is definitely consistency. The last thing we want to do is be posting to the public that we're out there denying and fighting to keep a tree, and then, have it be the case that at the hearing for it, that opinion changes. We have had this occur before. Sometimes examples would be a little bit more random, like a tree condition worsened, like now there's a crack where there wasn't one. So we hear you loud and clear. With that, I do want to kind of point out for the other members of the public, perhaps the property owner, perhaps other members of the public, to not kind of stand behind this green wall of we're perfect all the time, but just, I'm the urban forester. I've been doing this for 20 years as an educator for Friends Urban Forest for 5 years first. My goal is just to educate the public, whatever those facts are. And so if I'm presented with facts, I'm going to act on those. So I want to assure you, the good news here is when I see things that are inconsistent, I'm going to correct them. So that's my commitment to you as a civil servant, is to strive for that consistency, but not hide behind something that might even be considered a miss, So for sure, we need to talk to our team and talk about this. Do we need to start over with a fresh posting and let the public know, hey, this really is being supported for removal by the city? For this particular case, no. But again, not ideal. We totally acknowledge that. But we do want to also use our expertise and show what we have. And so once this was scheduled for a hearing, I discussed it with staff, and we needed to change course. With that said, it's great to hear. I've never met the property owner, but I've heard good things. So we'll definitely work on replacement species, and with their willingness to tackle the watering, that's incredibly helpful for us. So thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your comments. I will now close the item and will make my recommendations to the director. The next order is order number 204693. And this is to consider the removal of one street tree worth with replacement adjacent to 3944 22nd Street. May I have the department make their presentation?
Thank you. This is Chris Buck with Public Works, Bureau of Urban Forestry, regarding the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 3944 22nd Street, and staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Let's get this to advance. There we go. So the subject tree in this case is a Victorian box tree. The Latin or scientific name is Pittosporum or Pittosporum undulatum. And the reason for removal being sought by a public works project team is the construction of a new retaining wall here and some grading of the slope where the tree is located. Big picture, we've confirmed this is a public works managed project, not another agency. So we are going through our own tree removal permit process for this tree. This is in a public right-of-way. We have hundreds of these in San Francisco. The most famous, of course, is Lombard Street, the crooked street, where streets with really steep grades were often not developed as regular streets where you drive cars on them. So what they've turned into are these amazing open space areas that may look like parks, but are actually under the overall jurisdiction of public works, and they're often referred to as paper streets. That said, public works maintains all of the trees within the public right-of-way. So landscaping maintenance is the responsibility of the fronting adjacent property owners as if this were a regular sidewalk. But as you can see, it's anything but. It's open space area. That's a little bit about the overall site. The subject tree itself likely was not planted by humans, but birds who transported the seeds and landed there. It's a great street tree. It's considered it's on the invasive list for California, but we still plant it. We don't have a lot of open space areas where it's cropping up and becoming a problem. So it's a great street tree. The issue here is that where you can see in the image on the left, there's some wood timber that's holding the soil back. And this is going to be repaired and replaced with the concrete retaining wall. And there's going to be slope and grade changes here. So we looked at, okay, can this tree remain in place? But our inspector did do a little bit of hand digging with a tool just to get a sense of the root system down near the base of this retaining wall. But the main root or roots are really right near where they need to excavate and form forms and then pour concrete. So again, it's kind of a neat tree the way it's located, almost bends right over the sidewalk in a pleasant way. But the area is going to be worked on first time in many, many, many decades, probably 80 years. And this is an area that the immediate community has adopted with kind of their own greening campaign called the Jungle Stairs, which is kind of nice from a just heartening perspective that they're embracing these public rights of way and really trying to green them up as much as possible. And trees are a big part of their plans. So the area where the replacement tree would be planted, the image on the left, there's a redwood tree here that is no longer there on the left side of the stairway. Subject tree is to the right of the stairway. You can see it in the image on the far right in the sun, and then the image on the left, it's in shade. One thing to point out, even though I'm saying that's a great street tree, we are seeing it experience some decline due to climate change is what the scientists theorize of the species. But our inspector just wanted to note that the photo showing decline in the tree's health, that the photo on the left is March 2019 on Google Street View. His theory is that the removal of the redwood, you can see this redwood with an extreme lean. At some point that tree came down. Stephen was theorizing that maybe the exposure from the sun is stressing it out or burning. Victorian box is very thin bark, so it may be burning literally the trunk. But he was also theorizing that the redwood might have been infected with armillaria, which could have spread. Either way, we did look closely at the site. Stephen Keller, our inspector, his goal was to retain it at first. So he approached the project team at Public Works with retention in mind. But the more he found out about the project and the scope of work, and after hand digging, he conceded that, yeah, this tree really does need to be removed and replaced. And so where it would be replaced would be right across the stairway in this big area where there's plenty of room to plant. Again, just to repeat what Steve prepared here, the area is called the Jungle Stairs. It's managed by a community group. We're contacted by the group, and the replacement tree will be planted in this area. Additionally, the area is irrigated, so the new tree can be watered with the aid of irrigation and the oversight of a really committed team, the Jungle Stairs volunteers from that neighborhood. So also the cost of planting itself would be funded by the project. Regarding replacement species, I don't have that in front of me, but with such a big open area, I will make sure that it's a large stature tree at maturity, and we'll review that with Inspector Keller. So again, just to repeat, unfortunately, work that needs to occur here to form the retaining wall is going to destabilize the tree due to the amount of excavation and pouring of new concrete. But we do have a nice location slated for replacement and a community group that has a really great track record of establishing trees and other plants. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Looks like we have someone here from the project team that would like to speak. Anya Disbro.
Hi, good
Go
morning.
ahead. Oh.
Hi, good morning. My name is Anya Disbro. I'm with Public Works Structural Engineering Group. Chris already did a great job already explaining the project background and what we're trying to do. So just to add on a little bit about our project, Chris mentioned really the goal is to reconstruct that retaining wall. It's in poor condition. A portion of the board's already popping out. Soil is spilling onto the stairwell. Some of the wood is experiencing dry rot, and just the amount of weight on the wall from the vegetation and the trees, it's actually pushing the wall and it's actually resting on the railing. So we need to repair the wall, and our goal was to try our very best to preserve the tree, not damage the roots at all. But when we looked at it from a constructability standpoint, for the contractor to form it, put up shoring, there's really no easy way to protect those roots. The tree right now is really butted up on the existing wall. And another point is when we build the new wall, obviously we want it to last a lifetime, right? So there's no guarantee, the tree will grow, the roots will grow. It could possibly damage our new wall. So for those reasons alone, we are recommending that tree to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak? I see Miss Alyssa Erickson.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
I'm the landscape designer on the project, and I'm going to be working with the property owner at 495 Collingwood. And so with the removal of that tree and also the new wall, the plan is to re-landscape the whole hillside. And I also have a drawing and some plant images if I'm able to share my screen.
Yes, just one moment and I'll promote you to panelist. Just a moment. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Erickson. You should be able to share your screen. And also unmute yourself, please.
All right, hello.
There you go.
So these are the, you can all see my screen, yes? This
Yes,
is,
we can.
okay, so the plant palette is going to be mostly California natives that will do well in the San Francisco Bay Area. They're also low water. They will attract pollinators and birds, and they're good for the hillsides that will help prevent erosion and, you know, kind of hold that hillside intact. That's the intent with these plantings. And also to just complement the jungle side of the stairs where the community has planted the, you know, that landscaping there. I noticed that they have also planted some California native plants. So looking, I have all the botanical names here, but where my cursor is, this is a manzanita tree. This Arctostaphylos Pacific mist is a manzanita ground cover. The Salvia leucophylla amethyst bluff is a sage plant. The Rhamnus californica is a coffee berry. The Ceanothus, both of these, one is more of a shrub, taller form, and the other is a mounding ground cover. Those are the California lilac plants. And then there's the heuchera, which is also known as coral bells. And the only non-native to California is a rosemary, which the intention there is that it'll spread out and kind of mound over the wall. And here is a preliminary planting plan of how, you know, that hillside will look in plan view. And that is all. I just want to, you know, say that the full intention of this project is to, you know, build a retaining wall that will hold the hillside up and that will make it safe for everyone that passes by these stairs, that this tree will not, you know, one day fall over on them, but that we will build a solid concrete wall and have beautiful plantings for everyone to enjoy. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you so much. I see Mr. Clip.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Clip.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It seems like I'm the only member of the public here other than applicants and project managers. All right, well, I'll take that. So in terms of erosion and holding up hillsides, I know scientifically speaking, really nothing works better than tree roots. I think the proposed ground cover is very nice, and I do also really appreciate the nod to the focus on native plants. Tree roots, however, are certainly much more effective at preventing erosion than shrubby plants. Shrubbery in the scientific term, not in the derogative term, and certainly better than any concrete walls that we're going to try to do. It's good effort, but I think you know, if we really want to do this in the long term, we need to be planting trees that have roots that hold up our hillsides. Also, under Article 16, replacement is 1 for 1. So we've got that redwood there, which according to Google Street View, I just looked that up. It looks like it was sawed off a few, it's hard to tell, but it looks like maybe 2 or 3 feet above the ground versus just say tipping over. So, you know, there's plenty of room there and lots of, you know, just ground cover currently existing. It seems like there's under the law, this would be a 2 trees need to go in there, not just 1. And certainly there is enough space for that. So I would request that 2 trees be going in there, not just 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clip. Is there anybody else from the public here that would like to speak? Seeing none, would the department like to address any comments?
Thank you, Chris Buck with staff. This is my first time seeing a picture of that redwood, and I was curious about the sort of what happened to it. So noted about the request for 2 trees at the site. So I think that's a follow-up item that we could follow up with the project team on and get back to you as the hearing officer with something that could be included in your recommendation to the director.
Great, thank you. I will now close this item and I will make my recommendations to the director. The next item is order number 204694. This is to consider the removal of 1 street tree with replacement adjacent to 1407 Shafter Avenue. Would the department please make the presentation?
Thank you. This is Chris Buck with Public Works, and we're going to pull this up. This is regarding 1407 Shafter to confirm the removal of 1 street tree with replacement. And staff approved the removal and the public protested. So this is a different species that we haven't seen a lot of in our hearings over the last few years, but we have some of these out there in the public right away. It's referred to as a silk oak, and it's of course not truly an oak, and I guess silky. Underneath the leaves, it has a whitish look to it, so perhaps that's where that common name comes from. But the Latin name is Grevillea robusta. So there's a really huge one down around the corner from Valencia Street, around the corner from Fellow Barber. Really tall and massive, a single trunk with small secondary branches. So it's the form this species wants to have is very similar to a redwood. It's referred to technically as excurrent, meaning a single dominating trunk with secondary branches. So unfortunately, what happened to this tree many, many years ago is either the main trunk was topped by a homeowner and or damaged, and lateral branches, the side branches, started, because the tree genetically is programmed to go vertical, they all try to do that. And some of them have succeeded. And I'm putting succeeded in air quotes. But the tree has suffered 2 large limb failures. And we have some images here showing current condition of the tree. This is one of the large branch failures in 2017. And some of the area of that failure here, the second large limb failure, there's a large wound on the remaining limb. So it exposes this to decay. The mitigation may require removal of remaining damaged limb, significantly reducing canopy and the tree's ability to recover from injury. More than that, removing this malformed limb that bends at a right angle, it means that these additional stems on the left, which are essentially growing up from a side branch, it puts even more stress and weight in wind events on them. Whereas with a lot of branches, if you think about an oak tree in a field, all of those small little branches dampen the wind. They can take that energy from the wind and dampen it so that it reduces the wind load. So when we have large sections of a tree that you need to prune out to mitigate a public safety issue, it just means that the remaining sections are under a lot more force than they were before. And what that means is that if they were prone to failure prior, it makes them even more prone to fail. So this one was a very straightforward the case by our inspection team to approve this removal. The tree has been left with very poor structure. It's essentially absent or missing the central lead, which is our way of referring to the main trunk. So there's no main trunk to this tree. Trees are amazing though. They develop quite a bit of character, but in the public right of way, if that character becomes unsafe, we have to step in and say, enough, this is no longer a science experiment, it's a public safety issue. One other comment our inspector added here is that all the canopy of this tree is now oriented over the roadway, concentrated in 2 lateral branches. So for sure, there's a potential for these limbs to fail where they attach the main stem. And move my zoom screen here. 2 limbs remaining after corrective pruning, circled in red. Those would remain, but they would really be prone to fail if that's all we're leaving this tree with. Another image taken in 2017. The tree definitely had issues back in 2017, but the canopy sort of hides what those issues were that were lurking out there. Again, photo on the right is showing that at a minimum, we would need to remove this section on the right with that red line. You do that and you're just subjecting these 2 upright stems to really too much wind. In the Bayview, the wind here is pretty intense every afternoon, year round. So this species tends to have branch failure, so it is prone to branch breakage and failure. So to have a tree have this many structural issues combined with the species pattern of failure really makes it untenable for us from a public safety perspective. So based on that, our decision was to approve the tree for removal. It is with replacement, so there is room in that sidewalk for a replacement with another large stature tree. But that wraps up our staff presentation. This image on the left is showing we have 3 feet on center from the gas and no other utility conflict. So for sure we can plant the required replacement tree. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Is the property owner or applicant here and would like to speak? I see Michael Valente.
Yeah, hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Great. Yeah, Michael Valente, property owner at 1407 Chapter. Not much to add. Just want to thank everyone for coming out and taking a look. Yeah, our primary concern was any additional failures. Usually where that previous big branch fell just now, there's usually cars parked right there, and we got lucky that there wasn't anyone there when that branch fell, otherwise would have come right down on it. So yeah, we're happy to do a replacement tree and just want to make sure everything is kind of safe going forward. That's all.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak? I see Mr. Clip.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. I actually have no substantive comment to make about that particular tree. I just want to thank the Public Works team for your work today. I know that it takes a lot of time to prepare for this and everything that goes into making this happen. And I just appreciate all of your efforts to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Mr. Vern.
Yes, I'd like to weigh in and say appreciate the new property owners submit to the city for the replacement of the tree, and appreciate the city coming out and taking the pictures and doing and looking at the situation, and I concur with your recommendation. I'm the neighbor next door to the property owner. That's all.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Would the department like to address any comments?
No further comments. I'm a neighbor near 3rd and Palouse, so hello to some Bayview neighbors. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I will now close the item and I will make my recommendations to the director. That was our last order. Are there any public comments in any of the items on the agenda? This is for those who have not already spoken. Seeing none, I am closing this hearing. Thank you, everyone. This hearing is now closed.